Welcome to week 6, mapping business challenges to access control types. So basically this week we're going to take a look at a lot of stuff we've already learned, some of the laws and regulations we've had and how they're going to apply and what do we need to do. So our chapter, learning objectives, apply various access control methods to a range of business challenges, access control types, the relations to business, strategies. I'm also going to look at how control types apply to business challenges. What do we need to put in? So these are some of the things we're going to be looking at this week. Explain various access control types, to map them, create a comprehensive strategy that we're going to look at. So, business continuity, what is that? The goal of any access control system is not simply to keep people out, organization protected, but it also keeps the need running. We need to make sure that everything is running okay, that the business is going to run it even if there is some kind of disaster. Business continuity deals with worst case, hurricanes, fire, theft, just about anything that we don't think about. The aftermath of a disaster. There are two sides to business continuity. First, we can prevent, how we're going to prevent one, and then how are we going to recover from one. So, disaster prevention. When creating a business continuity, you need to start by brainstorming a list of what-if scenarios. Some disasters cannot be prevented, such as an earthquake or hurricanes, but you can help prevent them. I know where we worked, we had an office in Philadelphia and one in New Jersey. And basically what we set up was a disaster plan. If one of those two offices went down, we had conference rooms set up. So if you were in the Philly office and there was something happening down in Philly, we'd go over to the New Jersey plant and had room and computers ready to on cold standby that we'd update periodically. Basically, it just gives us an idea of what we're going to do in case of disaster. Today with hurricanes, fire, other natural disasters, you need to have some kind of preparation. The other thing, after you prep for it, we had generators in place, extra machines available, people could dial in from home. So you got to plan for what could happen. Where I worked, we had a snowstorm in November. The building was without power for 10 days because of trees and other power lines going down. So you need to prevent from this. And how do you recover? Access controls are not only important in preventing disaster, but also they are crucial in the aftermath of a natural disaster. What key personnel may not immediately be available? Rather than leaving the mission criticals unavailable, what are you going to do? Let's look at some disaster recovery issues that we have. What we did, like I said, we had remote access. We opened up remote that we didn't have anymore. There are other things that you can do. Not everyone will have access to get into the work area. So we had to come up with other areas of what we can do. So let's look at some more disaster recovery. So the access data, customer access data. The advent of the internet has made it easy for customers to order merchandise online whenever they want, track their history, and figure out what it is. How do we get information to what the customers want? So with this freedom, they want other stuff. Allow customers create and update their own. How much data we let the customers update? Allow customers create their own, or deny access of information directly. So what's one of the things we're looking at is how do customers go actually and create their own orders? This is something, when internet first started, you couldn't create your own order. You had to still talk to someone. But now with the new systems and updates, we're able to let customers go in and do what they want. How do we competitive advantage. In a competitive marketplace, information can be a key advantage. Trade secrets, product specifications, and business methods are all, however, if the competition also has access to the same information, the value of that information is considered lower. Keeping secrets out of the hands of competition is clearly access. Need to know, the least privileged. Only employees with legitimate needs to know sensitive information such as trade secrets and products formulation. So you keep who has that trade information, you keep that circle small. Technology access, strong passwords and policies to protect, using scripts to reject weak passwords, intrusion detection. That's the other thing. Physical security. Do you lock your building at night? Are the servers room in the data warehouse, are they locked? Do you need a password? Are they limited access? These are some of the things that we want to do to ensure that no one gets in. Administration policies. We talked about that last week. What policies are in place that keep people from getting in? Are they following the policies? Do we have, for a new employee, who has to sign off on what access that they have? Employee training is another big one. Do we train the employees to make sure that they don't give away information, that they know what's top secret and what's not? Risk and risk mitigation. 4 basic parts of it: avoidance, acceptance, transference, and mitigation. So what is avoidance? Risk avoidance is choosing to avoid an activity that carries some element of risk. For example, you may choose not to take your vacation in an active war zone. Regardless of how much natural beauty is found in it, there is risk if you go there. So risk avoidance is not always the best answer, but doing business in the healthcare industry carries certain level of risk if your business does not comply with regulations. So you want to be able, if you can avoid risk when possible, but you can't always avoid it. What is risk acceptance? Risk acceptance is simply accepting the risk and doing what you need to do. Firefighters, police officers, military, they have individual risk, but it's their job, so they accept to do it. Firefighter knows that he or she is at risk, but they still do it anyway. They accepted it for their personal safety. As a company, you can accept risk to go, hey, let's do this. Yes, it's risky, but let's try this new market. If you look at Tesla, they took a risk to open up a electric car company. Sure, there was risk in it, but they've been successful so far. We'll see what happens. Risk transference. Risk transference is shifting responsibility for risk to a third party. This is a tricky subject because sometimes risk transference makes sense and other times it doesn't. Purchasing health insurance is one way to transfer risk. Consider it so you can do that. Risk mitigation. Risk mitigation is a strategy that combines attempts to minimize the probability and consequences of the risk. Access control is an example of risk mitigation. It attempts to minimize what's going on. Threats and threat migration. Any organization faces threats to the IT infrastructure. The goal of access control is to mitigate these threats as much as possible. There are 3 main types: information confidentiality, information integrity, and information availability. Confidentiality, ensuring that private or sensitive data information is not disclosed to unauthorized personnel. Ensure that data has not been modified without authorization. How do we make sure that our data is safe? Who has access to the database? Ensuring that information available to authorized users when they need it. Someone's doing their job. They need to get to certain information, and they have to have availability. So when we're looking at data or information, we have to make sure that we keep it confidential, that we know it hasn't been altered, and we know that it's available when needed. Good access control system will guard all 3 of these. It will restrict access to sensitive information, authorize it to users who need it, and finally, it will prevent unauthorization. Some vulnerabilities. There's a weakness in the system that can be exploited. System vulnerabilities. So good access control must manage vulnerability and miss. We have to worry about operating systems. All operating systems have some type of vulnerability on it and threats. So we need to know what they are. The application can introduce vulnerabilities to the system. We talked about some of this last week also. Design flaws in application, holes or bugs. So we have to make sure that it is tested. And the last is always the users. We've talked about the effects of social engineering and how someone can just call up to get information. And that comes from training the employees to ensure that they are. Okay. So how do we just solve business problems? The key to applying access control to solving business challenges is taking a systematic approach and designing a comprehensive strategy. As you consider each element of access control, you will see how various strategies interrelate multi-layered systems. The first step in creating comprehensive control, the users. How do we ensure that the users know what they need to do? We need to train them. We need to show them what is good and what is bad. How do we make sure of this? Training is the best way. We got to look at the applications. Again, we talked about that a few seconds ago. Applications often access the data directly, reading files, making database connections, and we need to make sure that the applications are good. What about our network devices? A proxy on a network can often access other networks, and we need to make sure. So our infrastructure, we need to ensure our infrastructure is sound, that we have all the passwords in place, logins in place. Do we require biometrics, for sensitive data? Do we have maybe 2 people logging in? There's different things we need to look at. We can categorize these things into groups. Groups are useful because they allow you to generalize the group. So everyone in accounting, payroll has access to payroll. They can't see accounts payable. They can't see accounts receivable. They can only see one area. So the groups allow us to have that. We have the different roles. Also allow the general functions. We can have Bob holding his role in the workstation most of the time. So we can have different roles on who need it. Who needs access to which control? When creating the access control, the main question asks, who needs access and why? If the user does not have a legitimate reason to get access to it, then they shouldn't be granted access. So we need to determine who has that access. When deciding on which users need to try to think about this rather than individuals. Individuals leave the company. So if you put them into groups, even if it's only one person in that group, if that person changes, it's easy enough to change and you don't have to worry about it. You just remove someone from the group. Now we have external systems. Finally determine whether external subjects will have access to internal data. Is anyone outside the organization? Third-party applications, contractors, even employees who might be remote and considered external. Employees with access to sensitive data. What are the regulatory compliances? What are the privacies? Business continuity, competitive advantage. These are some of the things that we need to look at. At this point, you already have a comprehensive list of objects. Now you should go back and over the list and view what is required. What does the government say we have to have? How are we going to keep our business running? These are some of the things that we're going to have. Does this lead to a competitive advantage? Administrative. How will new accounts be created? Who has to sign off on them? How will new accounts be removed for the lower levels? Once you know what the subject to account for, what objects to protect with access controls, you can devise administration strategies to support access control. How will the accounts be created? New accounts be granted, and how will they be rolled out? New employees and ex-employees, how do you remove them? What is the policy for a new employee if they quit? We had policies if someone quit, it was one access control versus if they were fired. Usually if someone was quitting, they would give us 2 weeks notice. They'd stay on the books. If someone got fired, they were escorted out the room. And usually their access was actually disabled most of the time, even before they knew what was going on, to make sure they couldn't cause any ill problems. What are some technical issues we need to look at? Technical aspect of access control may include some of the following. Disaster access control. Access control systems where rights are assigned by the owner. Mandatory access control. Access control systems are unassigned by central authorization. Role-based. Access control systems rights are assigned based on the user's role. We talked about that earlier. Automated account review. All accounts should be reviewed periodically to ensure they are still needed at the access levels they have, that they're still being used, and should they be removed. Automated expiration. When accounts are created, temporary employees on a level, you can set it up to say, yep, this access is only going to be available for a week or 2 weeks, and it will automatically be removed. It would have to be reset. Some basic principles. Separation of duties. The principle of separation of responsibilities is designed to ensure if an attacker compromises one account, he or she will be denied access to highly sensitive information because the protection by two separate conditions. Both conditions must be met in order to access be granted. In one condition, it must be met, not the other. Access denied, separation of responsibilities. Accounting department employees usually do not have the ability to create new vendors and cut checks. The policy exists to prevent a single employee from creating a fake vendor, then creating a check to make it out. Safe deposit boxes usually have 2 keys and kept physically separate. Both keys must be sent. Missile launch. These are just some areas that we have to have. An access control separation of responsibility has 2 aspects: compartmentalization and dual condition. Compartmentalization is the practice of keeping sensitive functions separate from non-sensitive ones. In this practice, the implemented is by isolated programs under what user 1, dual conditions, and most that. The least privileged. This principle of least privilege is based on the idea that a subject, whether a user, application, or other entity, should be given minimum level rights necessary to perform legitimate functions. The purpose of this is to compromise the attacker. So someone has at least the rights, basic rights to do their job. In practice, least users, which is required. So what do they need to do their job? They need to log into the application and they can run it. Some risks of having administrators. On a server, having administrators logged into privileged accounts can create an opportunity for attackers. Also, if administrators regularly log into the server using administrator accounts to perform routine tasks, the Windows opportunity is larger. Also, you have malware. Some common roles. Malware is just a virus. So even if you're not doing administrative duties on this server, you should log in as administrator. That should be kept to only when they're administrator. There are 3 common rules when you should think about either working or administrator. We have an administrator who can always get into full rights. We have the user and guest. Many systems have other custom roles, but the administrator has root access to these workstations and perform on the system. They can create user accounts, install software, perform low-level maintenance, start and stop services. The administrator has full rights to the workstation. The user should be able to run their application, do their job, view information, look at files, but they shouldn't be able to run, install applications. And the guest has a limited number of data that they can have. It limits to what they can have. They should have a need to know, existence of operation. At this level, the subject only needs to know whether it is there or not. View partial information, view full records. These are just some of the different levels of access that they should have or shouldn't have. It allows us to keep the information in there. Input-output controls dictate if a user's ability to interact with devices, the guiding principle. What can they actually get to see? Input controls dictate how the user can interact with the data and devices that introduce new data to the system. For example, input controls might dictate whether the user is entitled to write a new file or modify existing ones. Input controls are concerned with physical security, such as automatically locking server rooms, securing information. Output are similar to input, except that they are primarily concerned with the output of the data, whether to see it on the screen or print it. User's ability to read data would focus on this. PIN identification. You don't want information to be printed. So this is just some of the things that we have. Third-party considerations. What do we have when we have to have a contractor in? What access are they going to get? How are they going to log into the systems? What are they going to see? What violations or what data do they need to share? What do they need to make sure that they don't get into? What is your confidentiality agreement with them? Anytime sharing third-party data, we have an issue. What happened with Facebook? Not that long ago, last month, they had they sent data out to a third-party, access to third-party information, and it was not used in the intended way. What are the ramifications of that? SaaS, software as a service. This is becoming very big. It allows people to have data available to them pretty much anywhere. Microsoft Word, if you get 365, that's up on the server, so you don't even download it. They maintain it, they do the updates to it. A lot of third-party vendors are using this, or a lot of companies are using third-party. It allows them, instead of me worrying about building an application, we have the experts build it and we use it. We put trust in that they're going to do what's right. They follow the laws. Basically, it has less cost because we don't have to develop it. We don't have to maintain it. It is centralized. One of the good things, or at least the ones I have used, it's up on the internet. So you can get to it literally from anywhere in the world as long as you have access to it. So that's a good thing about access control. I'm sorry, SaaS. What does a mesh network topology look like? Well, basically it means you can connect to anything at any time. Your laptops can connect across this to your computers, to your cell phones. How many times have you used your cell phone as a hotspot because they didn't have network servers? Well, that's kind of what a mesh network is. You can either use whichever one has the device, it allows us to have it. But basically, any node can connect to any other node. And this is what we're trying to get to. So it's a seamless application. So it doesn't matter where we are or what we're doing. It allows us to connect and have information going across the board. So what did we look at? The different types of access control. Access control and how business challenges. How do we keep the business running during disaster? What do we do after the disaster? And how do we solve that? All access control systems are about solving problems and meeting business needs. In order to be effective, you should be familiar with a variety of access control types and understand how to map those types to various business challenges. Understand how control systems are used in the real world and how to integrate them into our systems. That was chapter 6. So, have a wonderful day. Remember to smile.